Jen has ordered a decadent seafood tower, king crab legs, lobster tails, and a waterfall of caviar. Pricey? You bet. But Jen worked with Empower on her savings and investment strategy and planned for splurges like these. She got good at money, so she can be a little bad. Ooh, champagne. Empower. Invest well, live a little. Start today at empower.com.
Past performance is not indicative of future returns. Investing involves risk. You may lose money. Advisory services are provided for a fee by Empower Advisory Group, LLC, EAG, a registered investment advisor with the Securities and Exchange Commission. OMG, those shrimps are really jumbo.
At Panasonic, we build technologies that turn complex data into smarter decisions, helping you prepare for what's next. We're building the future so you can lead it. Panasonic. Create today, enrich tomorrow.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. House Democrats have now released Jeffrey Epstein's so-called birthday book, and it absolutely wrecks the spin that Donald Trump and the White House have been offering up about this whole sordid affair. The much-discussed note Trump wrote to Epstein appears to be very real, and there's even an image of a big check that discusses selling a fully depreciated woman to Trump for over $20,000. At the White House briefing Tuesday, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt struggled to spin away all this damning new information. She seemed pretty ticked, angrily snapping at the media on all kinds of other things. Meanwhile, House Republicans went into full ostrich mode, and MAGA media personalities furiously denounced all of it as a hoax. It's all an unnerving window into the force of the MAGA disinformation machine when it goes into hyperdrive for Trump. Today we're talking to MSNBC's Steve Bannon, who has a good piece looking at the more preposterous things Republicans are doing to make this all go away. Hey Steve, good to see you, man.
Greg, it's great to be back.
So after MAGA spent years hyping the materials gathered in the criminal investigation into Epstein, Trump took power and his people looked at the files and then they went right into cover-up mode. Now we've seen the book Epstein's friends dedicated to him on his 50th birthday, and the lewd drawing with all the cryptic, suggestive lines from Trump about their shared tendencies is indeed in there, and it sure looks like it was signed by one Donald J. Trump. Steve, can you sum up what we just learned here?
Well, I can try. I think that we get to a point in this story. We reach a new point in this story in July when the Wall Street Journal first reported on the existence of this so-called birthday book, at which point the White House, Donald Trump and his allies immediately denounced all of this. In fact, they sued the Wall Street Journal saying that this entire reporting is fake, that there is no such document, that the president doesn't like to draw, and so that no one should take any of this seriously. And for a while, that was more or less going to work for them as an official line, because at that point we hadn't seen any evidence to the contrary. We had the journal's reporting and we had the Trump's claims, and that was it. But things changed this week, obviously. We've seen the document. Now we've seen this letter. Now we've seen this information that has been released by congressional Democrats. And so the story has fundamentally changed. I mean, at this point, the White House has a decision to make, I should say. Do they either acknowledge the existence of this letter, or do they pretend that Donald Trump didn't sign a letter that he obviously signed? Unfortunately for everyone involved, including reality, the White House chose the latter course, and now we're dealing with the consequences.
Well, the White House is claiming Trump's signature is a forgery. And Steve, in your piece, you pointed out for this to be true, for Trump's signature to be forged, it would have to have been done many years ago, since the birthday book is from 2003. And this would have been done despite the book being in possession of the Epstein estate, which has it. So it turns out Caroline Leavitt was asked about this little problem by reporter Maggie Haberman. Listen to this.
The president has one of the most famous signatures in the world, and he has for many, many years. You know that, Maggie, you've covered him for a long time, long before he assumed this office when he was a businessman in New York. The president did not write that letter. He did not sign those documents. He maintains that position, and that position will be argued in court by his lawyers. The president is very confident he's going to win this case.
So yeah, that doesn't really add up. The Times looked at a bunch of Trump's signatures from around the time of this birthday book, and they had almost identical features to the ones on the birthday note. And that aside, saying he has a famous signature, the most famous signature in the world, note again ministering to the audience of one's ego, doesn't explain why it's on that note or why someone would have forged it. Your thoughts on that, Steve?
Yeah, the phrase literally unbelievable keeps coming to mind. I mean, here we are. I mean, I'm not unsympathetic. If I'm Caroline Leavitt, I don't know what to say either. This is an unspinnable story. It's an undeniable reality that she is confronting. And so she's doing her best with, I guess, she's doing her best with what she has, but what she has is ridiculous. The idea that Donald Trump's signature was somehow manufactured 20 some years ago, being held onto by the Epstein estate in this obvious document that the president obviously signed, and that somehow this was all of this an elaborate conspiracy that somehow also led to his same signature appearing on all these other documents. It's preposterous on its face. But let's not forget the larger context of this, which is they have nothing else. They have nothing else because the alternative is to acknowledge the fact that Donald Trump sent this cryptic message with this creepy drawing to a convicted pedophile who was his longtime friend. And so rather than acknowledge that reality, they're stuck spinning this preposterous tale that no one can seriously believe.
Well, it's certainly mystifying. And here's the thing. We don't know what's really in the Epstein files involving Trump. There's been some reporting that the FBI has been told to look through the files for mentions of his name and so forth, but nobody really knows what's in there. And they keep saying that the whole thing's a hoax, but then you kind of wonder, well, if it's a hoax cooked up by Democrats, which is another choice piece of spin that Trump and Leavitt are offering, why not release the files? Wouldn't releasing the files show that it's a hoax, as you say? None of it adds up in any sense. And the thing is, you got to wonder why they're doing it this way in particular, because given that we don't know what's in there, it actually increases suspicion that there's something really dark and disgusting in there involving Trump.
Yeah, one of the most remarkable things about this controversy over the course of the last several months to me is the fact that they've taken a series of steps that have made it much worse for themselves. I know of a great many of observers in media, in the public, and elsewhere who have said that they were skeptical of the entire controversy until they started to watch the Trump White House and its allies engage in this cover-up. At that point, the people who were skeptical of it became less skeptical and more interested in hearing more about the controversy, because ordinarily when we're dealing with Trump and his allies, when they act like they have something to hide, it's because they have something to hide.
To stay up to date on all the news that you need to know, there's no better place than right here on the DSR Network. And there's no better way to enjoy the DSR Network than by becoming a member. Members enjoy an ad-free listening experience, access to our Discord community, exclusive content, early episode access, and more. Use code DSR2025 for a 25% off discount on sign up at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. That's code DSR2025 at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Well, yeah, and there's another piece of Leavitt spin I want to play as well. There's this picture of a check in the book, the birthday book, with a note saying that a fully depreciated woman was sold to Trump for $22,500. Here's what Leavitt said about this.
One of the other documents released by the House Oversight Committee contained a photo of Jeffrey Epstein holding an oversized check that was made out to him in the check from the president for $22,000 for a fully depreciated woman. I wondered if the president has any recollection of that, or what do you guys make of that photo that was included in those documents?
Did you see the signature on that check? It is not Donald Trump's signature. It is absolutely not. The president did not sign that check.
So, Steve, of course, she totally dodges there. The issue is not the check's signature. It's the note that was with it. Why is that note there?
Now we have this additional element of this photograph and the reference to a fully depreciated woman, which is obviously disgusting rhetoric, which only compounds the severity of the overall scandal. It adds so much to the overall scandal. I'm not surprised that Leavitt struggled with this line of questioning, because there is no defense. There is no argument that's going to be able to just make this go away. There's no silver bullet a silver bullet of rhetoric that will somehow answer the question, because it's just too overwhelming.
I want to move to Republicans because what they're saying is even crazier, if that's possible. They've all been forced to pretend Trump and the White House are making a real argument here. Congressman James Comer, the chair of the Oversight Committee, said, quote, "The president says he did not sign it, so I take the president at his word," close quote. And Comer says they won't investigate the signature piece of this. I mean, Steve, it's really something for the chairman of the Oversight Committee to say we're not investigating because the president told us it's a fake charge.
Right. Yeah. As if Donald Trump has such a great track record for telling the truth. What could possibly go wrong? I realize that James Comer is a difficult person to take seriously. I realize that he is a knee-jerk partisan. He's going to obviously do whatever Donald Trump says he wants. He's effectively playing the role of a White House employee. And so none of us, I don't think, are surprised by this. But at the same time, it's so shameless. It's so brazen. It's so on its face absurd that I think that ultimately, in the eyes of anyone who's taking this process seriously, James Comer comes across as a clown.
I want to read a quote from Senate Majority Leader John Thune, which isn't much better. Quote, "There's a dispute about whether that's really his signature, so it's just going to be argued back and forth," close quote. Yeah, it's just a dispute. We don't have any role here, says the majority leader of the U.S. Senate, which has all kinds of oversight powers and responsibilities.
His responsibilities, I think, is the key word there. I mean, this is not supposed to be optional. I mean, Congress has a responsibility under the Constitution to do oversight of the executive branch, and yet here we have a president caught up in a very serious scandal with mounting evidence against him. And John Thune on one side of Capitol Hill and James Comer on another are just simply washing their hands of the whole mess as if they have nothing to do with it. And yet they clearly do. They could get answers for us and for themselves. And yet they seem completely indifferent.
Well, Steve, you've been covering politics a long time. There was a time at which you would have expected senior leaders of a party whose president is in such a pickle, in such a deep scandal, to go to the White House and say, "Mr. President, this isn't working. We really have to do something else here. We're going to have to be a little more transparent. We know that you're in a difficult position, Mr. President, but this isn't working for us. We're getting absolutely slaughtered out there." By the way, Republicans are getting absolutely slaughtered out there. The polls are killing them on the Epstein stuff. And so why isn't that happening here? I take that sort of, if you step back, it really feels to me like something different is happening here from what you'd ordinarily expect. There's a level of cultish devotion to the guy at the top that's just deeply unnerving and very different from what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's two elements here. I mean, I think for some Republicans, there's genuine fear. I think that from the perspective of some Republicans who are watching these events unfold, they realize that they'd like to do more, but they're afraid of the MAGA base. They're afraid of conservative media. They're afraid of what the White House might do in terms of primary rivals and investments in primary rivals and super PACs and so forth. And so they toe the line because they feel like it's necessary for the advancement of their career. I think that is a risky bet. I think that given the way the polls are unfolding right now and the prevailing political winds and historical trends as it relates to the midterms, I think that is a risky bet for them. But nevertheless, I understand that that helps explain the motivation for some. But I think the other part of this, that's the first part. The second part, though, I think is something that you just said a moment ago. It's cultish behavior. I mean, I do think that the Republican Party, to a very real degree, has become a cult of personality. I think that Donald Trump, of course, is the strong man at the head of this cult. And for most Republicans, it's a question of just this blind loyalty, this knee-jerk reaction to every scandal, to every controversy, to every question. And so Donald Trump says that he didn't sign this document that he obviously signed. So as far as they're concerned, that's just good enough.
One thing that's so bizarre about what you just said there is Republicans are afraid of the MAGA base on this. But literally a few months ago, all of MAGA wanted to know what was in the files.
Yeah, it's funny how quickly they can change their minds once Donald Trump has told them that everything's fine. Don't worry about what's in the documents. These aren't the droids you're looking for. And then a lot of that crowd just moved right on.
Yeah, and Media Matters' Matt Gertz actually did a really good job of sort of showing how all these major MAGA opinion makers turned 180 degrees the second Trump told them to stop talking about it, which is just extraordinary. You'd think they'd have like a scintilla of independence or curiosity about what they're seeing.
One might assume, and yet here we are.
I find the whole thing highly unsettling that the entire machine can go into hyperdrive in such a deceptive way. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I think the use of the word machine there is important because what we've seen in this instance and in every instance of, as far as I'm concerned, since over the last decade or so, is that no one person can drive disinformation by himself or herself. It requires a coordinated, comprehensive approach. And so there's Donald Trump, there's Caroline Leavitt, there's the White House communications operation, kind of just writing the script as absurd and preposterous as it is on its face. They write this script and they send it out. And then, so what happens? We see congressional Republicans reading it. We see conservative media personalities reading it. We see we see MAGA activists promoting it on social media. It is a comprehensive approach. And they do this because they have a track record of success with it. I mean, you look back over the last several months, for example, how many Republicans right now believe that job numbers aren't real? Well, they are real, but yet because they're discouraging and because they reflect the failure of Trump's economic agenda, the MAGA base and Republicans in general have convinced themselves, well, the job numbers aren't real because the White House told us that they're not real. And the same is true on crime statistics, the same is true on climate data, and so on and so on. Even on vaccines, the White House writes the script, and then it goes. There's this pipeline of information, or I should say, disinformation, and we see this machine kick into gear, to borrow your term, and it's extremely effective. And what's discouraging for the rest of us is that we know, our weird uncle who watches Fox all day is going to believe it because they've been conditioned to discount they've been conditioned to discount independent information. And so here we have the same feedback loop that we've seen so many times over the course of several years play out again and again. And here we are watching it happen once more.
Well, where's this going, Steve? You've got this kind of pressure building. Recently, the Epstein survivors all spoke out, and it was incredibly powerful stuff. We're at the point where it looks like a discharge petition really may well pass that would supposedly compel release of the Epstein files, although there's some doubt about whether it actually would or not, and there's some doubt about how the Justice Department would handle it. I have trouble understanding how the status quo continues forever, and I'm looking for some help here, really, in understanding where this could go. Does there come a point where Republicans finally relent and, in some sense, maybe allow or call for a larger release of the Epstein files than the one we're seeing right now that House Republicans are engineering, which is all bullshit? Maybe a limited release that sort of looks more like a release than what they're doing now. Does this change?
I am not optimistic. I want to be able to reassure you and your listeners that there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and it is the light of transparency. I want to be able to do that. But I've also grown cynical in a way after seeing what happened after January 6th, after Donald Trump's defeat in 2020, after the rewriting of the story of COVID. And there have been so many instances over the last several years in which Republicans have waged a war against the recent past, and they've succeeded and they've won because they managed to convince just enough people to survive just long enough to win the news cycle and to win the argument such as it is. And so do we come to a point in the near future in which Republicans relent, or at least just enough Republicans relent? I am skeptical. I mean, I think that we will soon see what's going on in terms of the House discharge petition, whether there could be just a small handful of GOP House members to come around. But yet they've had plenty of time to do that. They've had plenty of opportunities. They've seen plenty of the polls, and yet they don't do it, which is why I'm so discouraged, which is why I find it hard to believe that in the coming weeks and months that there will be this turnaround because they haven't done it yet. And I think that given their track record and their slavish devotion to Donald Trump, it is difficult for me to see a point in which they come around.
So if that's the case, then we just continue like this with more and more dribs and drabs coming out that look worse and worse and worse, and somehow they just keep the lid on the pressure cooker?
Yes, that is what I think is going to happen.
And it never blows up.
Well, I mean, if we're waiting for a smoking gun, there probably will not be one. There's not going to be a document in which Donald Trump makes some kind of unbelievably felonious admission to his former friend, and that comes to public light, and then all of a sudden the sky falls. I mean, it's unrealistic to think that he ever signed such a document, or there is such a piece of information, a piece of evidence like that. But I think that in all likelihood, this will simmer for the next several months. The White House will continue to come up with equally preposterous denials, and the MAGA base and conservative media and their allies will just continue to play along.
Well, that's really a remarkable thing to contemplate. You got to keep coming back to this underlying question that won't go away, which is, why won't they release the files? What's in there involving Donald Trump? Because if there were any other person that this would implicate, and while not implicating Trump, they would just throw that person under the bus instantly. Instantly,
of course. Yes. I mean, that is one of the foundational problems here, is that we are all aware of that dynamic, and yet the administration can't overcome it, and Republicans aren't prepared to ask questions about it.
Just to end this, because let's put it out of its misery. It's just all so awful. You've been around a long time, Steve. For the longest time, living through the Bush years, the Obama years, the right-wing media and disinformation machine was really kind of something to be feared and, frankly, something to be kind of impressed by if you're in politics. They were so good at certain points throughout that long history I'm talking about at controlling the media environment, at controlling the narrative, and so forth. It's so strange to see it devolve into something so pathetically ridiculous like this. I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, the point you raised a couple minutes ago, Greg, I think is resonating with me, and I think is especially salient, which is we saw so many Fox hosts and others in conservative media who were actually taking a relatively principled stake. They were taking a relatively principled line as it relates to the Epstein scandal. And then all of a sudden they did that 180. And I think that really speaks to the fact that we're no longer really dealing with media professionals, even conservative professionals. We're dealing with hacks. We're dealing with people who will simply go along with what they're told to go along with. They're people who are willing to take direction and read scripts as it's been handed to them. And that's fundamentally different from what we saw, say, 5, 10, 15 years ago in conservative media, where they were a force to be reckoned with instead of a joke.
Well, Steve Bannon, you wrote a book about what happened to the right wing and the disinformation machine. It's called Ministry of Truth, Democracy, Reality, and the Republicans' War on the Recent Past. Folks, check it out. Steve Bannon, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thank you. See you soon.